just yeah. Okay, so let's get started. And again, as I said, we are gonna take a look at some equations. Another thing is, again, this is not a math class, right? You know, we are looking at those equations from a perspective engineer that try to solve the problem like we care, right? So it's kind of a little bit on the application side. So, you know, last time we talked about the single degree of freedom system and MDOF and how we do this analogy thing to basically take a look at some sort of structure and have the mass lumped at some point and use the stiffness of the structure replaced by a spring with a stiffness, and then we will throw in a dashpot to reflect the damping of the system, because we know as any real material in life, if they're going to deform or deform back and forth, the energy will be absorbed. So you definitely have to have a mathematical model to represent that, right? So, and we talked about the difference between the single degree single degree freedom system and the multi degree freedom system. And again, for this class, we're only gonna get into the SDOF system. So yeah. Did we talk about this a little bit or no? Okay. Well, for a lot of structures, kind of if they're kind of bouncing left and right, we can use this little card over here to represent that, right? And you know, this class again is a little bit on the geotech side, and we're gonna look at a analogy that is similar, more kind of appropriate for a foundation type of thing. That you have the mass lumped up here, and you have a spring constant to represent not the foundation itself, but more about maybe the soil as well, and have the dashboard to reflect the damping or the potential energy absorbing ability of the soil, right? So basically, I'm just gonna kind of just have things going a little bit this way, like this mass is moving up and down, and it won't be able to move left and right for this purpose. So it's essentially the same as here, which this model you're gonna see a lot for structures, but here we're gonna look at this as a kind of foundation type of analogy. Okay, and again, mathematically they are the same, right? So we're gonna start with something pretty simple here. This is, by the way, I updated the slide a little bit. So if you're taking any notes or a tablet, you probably want to refresh your slides. So basically today we're gonna try to use math to basically answer some questions. So for example, if I'm gonna ask you this scenario that you have a mass up here, start with something real simple, okay? And also this mass can only move up and down, okay? So although we have some gap here, but will not allow the mass to move left and right. With something real simple over here. So from a engineering judgment standpoint, if this spring is an ideal spring, that means no friction, no nothing. It's just an undamped case. If you put the mass over here and you have a spring, and first of all, will come to a position that is kind of the neutral position, right? Because you have the mass will have gravity. The gravity will compress the spring a little bit. I say the mass is at a neutral position right over here. So if you push this mass down, I don't know, for an inch, what is your best engineering judgment of the movement of this mass over time? It will kind of jump up and down, right? Jump up and down. And will it stop? In the real world, yes. Because, yes, if there's no friction, if it's the ideal spring, again, we'll start with something pretty simple here. Then it probably will jump up and down, like forever. Yeah, yeah. So undamped means that the spring is also a perfect spring. There's no dash pot associated with that. You're right. So it's probably gonna jump up and down, like forever. So you think about it, do you think the movement of that mass over time, what's the best mathematical function to describe that movement, describe the relationship between the movement on the y direction over time? Probably sinusoidal, right? Sinusoidal. And you are absolutely right. It is a sinusoidal. But can you prove it? I know from our engineering head, we know it's gonna be a sinusoidal wave beautifully going on forever. Can you prove it? Yeah? Yes. No? Gage? Right. Right? But I can counter argue that don't write this now, okay? I can counter argue that, oh, this is your Z, this is your neutral position. I can counter argue that, hey, it probably gonna move like, how about move like a circle? Like half circle, another half circle. This looks like sinusoidal. But you know what I'm saying? Like, what if it's a circle? What if it looks like you said it's jump up and down? Oh, what about this? This is also jump up and down, right? Constant slopes. Okay, so, but I absolutely love your answers about, from kind of instinctively, it should be like sinusoidal, right? And now we need mathematics to prove it. That's one thing we're gonna do today. Another thing is they might want to ask you, hey, what is the period of one cycle? Right? That's an interesting question, right? Is it gonna like move super fast or is gonna move super slow? Does the period or the frequency have anything to do with the whole system and how they're all be associated together, right? But you probably can have some educational guess as well. If we're talking about the same mass, if the spring is super stiff, do you think that mass will move faster or slower? Super stiff. Yeah. Just asking, it's gonna be faster or slower? Probably faster. I don't know. We'll talk about that. And what if the spring is super soft? It might be slower. I don't know. And what about the mass? If the spring, the same spring, if the mass is super heavy, what's gonna happen? Slow. Okay, so I think we're on the right track. So shall we now solve this problem? No? Okay, so let's do this. Well, this is a free vibration, undamped, so it means there's only one spring, no dashpot, and just a little spring over here, right? So if we set up a coordinates based on the neutral position, when I say the neutral is just the natural position of the mass in equilibrium state, that we're gonna set up z. Z is a function of time, right? So we're gonna, let's say, move this little mass down for a little bit and let it go. And we know this mass will kind of jump up and down. And now I'm just saying that, okay, the downward direction is a positive direction. This is a positive direction. So if we look at this mass, because there's no external force, right? Because we push it down, give them initial displacement, and boom, we let it go, right? We let it go. And during this process, what is the driving force? Yeah. So would you agree that if I push this down for a little bit z, then this mass over here, if we push this down, if we have a positive z, then you would have a force from the spring. That force would be k times z. Would you agree? Right? If we push this thing down by z, that would be k times z. That is a force. Right? So push this down, your z is positive. If you let it go, according to Newton's law, your F, second Newton's law, F is m times a. Right? F is m times a. What is a? Acceleration, right? That's nice. So if you push this thing down for z, at the moment that you let it go, tell me the acceleration is going up or going down? As we let it go. The acceleration will go up. Yeah. Yeah. But no. You push it down, you let it go.
So is your force going to carry it through the spring, or is the force you're pushing it just so like the spring remains stiff?
Yeah. You at the distance z, you let it go. You let the force go. Yeah. So the acceleration will try to go up. Is that right? Right. So it's not an impact load. It's just slowly. Forget about the any force you apply. You're applying some force, yes, but when you get that spring to deform about z, you let the force go. Let this thing to do free vibration. We're talking about at any moment during the free vibration, what's the force is going to look like. Okay, so any moment during the free vibration, we're talking about your F is ma, and your a is, according to this system, is going up. So your a is essentially, this does not have any direction, right? But your acceleration is also, we can write this as in the double derivative of your displacement, right? The double derivative of the displacement. So basically what we're talking about is your kz, your spring force, equals, according to the Newton's second law, is m times second derivative, but we have to put a negative sign up there because acceleration is going up, but your z is still a positive number. you do two derivative, that's gonna be still basically your your acceleration is going up. So in the eyes of the equation, it should be a negative number, right? So basically now the governing equation of this whole thing is m times z dot dot plus k and z is 0. So for free vibration, this is your governing equation. Now the problem is, let's try to solve this equation because we know z is a function of time, of t, right? So how are we going to solve this equation? For z. Yeah. Yes, maybe some DVQ. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, let's refresh our memory a little bit about the beautiful the differential equation. So remember, in your class, you probably learned how to solve something like this, right? Do you remember the general solution to this equation? And how do we solve this? Okay, so we would write this to a form. Ring a bell a little bit, right? Yes, right? And then we would take into different scenarios that y'all took that class, okay? So don't look at me that I'm the alien here. So, right? So this is familiar. So we rewrite this as here, and then we do we will look at this to see how many roots does it have, right? If you have two real roots, we're talking about scenario that your b squared minus 4ac is larger than 0. And if you have two identical real roots, that this is 0. And if you have two complex roots, we're talking about this is smaller than 0, right? And for this different scenarios, we would have different general solutions. But I want to remind you that for this case over here, if you have two complex roots, and if your roots are 2 is alpha plus beta times that beautiful I complex number. And then the general solution is what? C1 times cosine beta t plus C2. Yes, beautiful. Times t. I'm not gonna get into how we got this, and we're gonna use the Euler or Euler's identity and beautiful function, right? Euler's, oh man, that function is really beautiful. Like theta is what? Cosine theta times I plus I times sine theta, right? So you're gonna use that a little bit to get into that. So okay, if we have, I wish I could teach you the math, but anyway, so it's beautiful. But anyway, so that would be the general solution if you have two complex number as the roots. So no, this is power of I theta. Yep. Okay, so now this is the foundation we got from our the math class. So let's take a look at this governing equation here. So tell me which scenario should be applied from all those three. How can we come up with something a little bit similar? Yes. Yes. And let's solve for the roots. M is the mass, it's going to be a real number, it's going to be a positive number. K is the constant or the stiffness of the spring, it's going to also be a positive number. So we're talking about R squared is negative K over M. Is that right? And then our roots, R1 and R2 is basically K over M Mi. Because we know that our K and M are positive real numbers. So our roots are two complex number. So if there are two complex number, so we should apply for this. Oh, no. So we should apply for this case over here. Would you agree? Right? So, and based on the roots, so our roots is this, and we can kind of rewrite this as 0 plus and minus square root K and M times I. And you look at this, you look at that. Can someone tell me the general solution for this equation? Have you seen an I?
That's a legal That's a legal.
Tony.
I also didn't know that.
Okay, it's outside of the square root. Guys, I squared is -1, right? You're complaining about 2008? I took it in 2006.
I spent 5 years working with trees and bringing eyes.
And the treat will help with your eyes.
What kind of trees?
Okay, so okay, guys, hey. Look, hey, look at this, and look at that, and I basically have everything on a little platter. So tell me what's the general equation for Z over here, or the solution?
C1 cosine over M times T plus C2 sine.
Plus C2 sine K over M times T. Beautiful. That's absolutely right. Yeah. Okay, so now let's pause for a little bit, and I'm gonna give you the first definition that we would define this. This is the definition, okay? There's nothing to do with the math or whatever. This is the definition. So we would define omega n as square root of equals square root of k over m. This is not a definition out of nowhere because this is a strict definition that we look at the solution and we find this, right? We find this. And we call this as undamped natural frequency. Specifically, undamped natural circular frequency. And the unit is rad. Rad per second. So now kind of rings a bell a little bit, like omega t, sine omega t. Now we have the circular frequency, then we probably can get the real frequency, we can get a period. You know what I'm saying? Just use a 2 pi to convert everything. So we'll get that later. So and then we kind of can rewrite this as C1 times cosine omega n t plus a C2 sine omega n and t. And from here, you pretty much can get the answers of the questions we asked in the beginning. The movement of that little mass is gonna be a sinusoidal function with t, right? Because you have cosine, you have sine, you all have omega n, you basically can just get those two things together, right? So we'll get to that. But again, this is the general solution. So the differential equation will give you the general solution, but we still have two unknowns. One is C1 and C2. And what do we need to solve or to get a specific solution for this problem?
Yes. Now, doctor, then guess from another equation, and then, or you could do it another way.
Okay. The answer I was looking for is we need boundary conditions. All right.
Yeah.
So okay. That's not a guess. So we need boundary conditions. Well, because general equation is just general form, we need the boundary conditions. Well, we can have a couple boundary conditions. So I'm kind of running out of space. So I will just continue. Well, the boundary condition. We can have two boundary conditions. First one, displacement. That your z at time is 0. You can have a z naught. I'm using a z naught, and you know that it's a value. It's not a number. It's a value that depends on where you depends on how much you push that thing down. Does that make sense? If you push that thing for 1 inch, you let it go, start a timer, then that 1 inch is the original, the z naught. And then you typically would get a velocity boundary condition that your z1 dot at t at 0 is v naught. Because you have two constant, right? You have two constant, or you have two unknowns, C1 and C2, you need two boundary conditions to solve that, right? So with those two boundary conditions, we can solve for your real function that is z times cosine omega n t minus a alpha. Oh, sorry, no, you're right. It's not derivative, it's z. And where does z? Yeah, they're both z's. So this z is the amplitude. The second z is I want to make this equation a little bit smaller. So this capital Z is the amplitude, that is z naught squared plus em over k time v naught squared. And your phase angle, alpha, is tangent v naught over z naught times square root k over m. And I'm sure you would understand how we combine the sine and the cosine together. That's just a simple trigonometry, right? So this is my drawing board. Okay. So now with this solution, you can very confidently say the movement of that mass with just a spring is a beautiful sinusoidal wave. It's not a circular wave. It's not a like a straight line go up and down, because now there's a solution. Okay, so with that, and we also know the circular frequency. We talked about the undamped natural frequency, circular frequency. So we can have another two deformations. The first one is the undamped. Again, another definition, the undamped natural period. That is T. What is the relationship between the natural period and the circular frequency? Two pi over omega n, right?
I'm a little lost at why we're solving these. Where did we?
That's basically based on. No. Connor, we have this C1 and the C2, right?
Right.
Because we need to solve for the C1 and C2.
Yep.
And then we need to get those two boundary conditions to solve the C1 and C2. Mm-hmm. For example, if your T is 0, you can solve for one thing, and then you do a dot of the Z, and you get another boundary condition N, you can solve for another factor. Okay. So after we... cosine 0 is 1. Yeah, sine 0 is 0. Yeah. Yeah. You solve for C1. Solve for C2. And then after you solve C1 and C2, and then you just combine those two together. Right? Okay. And then the reason why I want to get this is to apply a little bit trick inside to combine those two together to make one elegant thing. Because the reason why we make this one thing is because we know the amplitude of this thing, the thing in the dashed line, is what? Is 1. The amplitude of the cosine, however that much is only 1. So then I can get the amplitude out. So that now I can very confidently just apply something like this. And this would be your capital Z, which is the equation of the Z naught and the V naught. Right? So the thing is, I could solve the whole thing, but again, it's going to take forever. But this is something like you should be able to do during class. So, Gage?
Just to make sure that C on the left side of the equation, that's displacement, right? Displacement is equal to the amplitude.
This one, yes, this is a displacement, yes. But you do one derivative, you will get velocity.
Right.
You get another derivative, you get acceleration. Okay? Yeah. Z is always displacement. Yeah. But the undamped natural frequency, natural period is t equals 2 pi over omega. That is something from probably like high school physics, right? 2 pi over omega. Right? And you can do this using math, using unit, because the unit of the omega n is what? Is rad per second, right? And what is 2 pi? It's a complete circle. It's a whole circle. And it's 2 points. If it's not angle, is it 6.28 rad, right? Rad is gone. Second flip up. That's the beautiful unit of the Tn, right? So, okay. And the natural period, and what about another one is the undamped natural period. Oh, sorry, frequency. And we use F to do that. What is the relationship between F and T? Yeah. That is basically omega n over 2 pi. That is basically 1 over 2 pi times k over m. What is the unit of Fn? Yeah. Nice. Because the whole point of frequency is that within 1 second, how many cycles do you have? Okay, that's the point. That's the physical meaning of frequency. Within 1 second, how many cycles do you have? Okay, that's the frequency. What is the frequency of that little light up there? Did you guys just like watch film during your high school physics?
Our high school was a little different than yours.
All right. And also our physics here, talk more, that's fine. Let's make it like Squid Game, and then you guys will all learn all the stuff.
Oh, you got
So the frequency of our alternate current is somewhere between 55 hertz to 60 hertz. Does that ring a bell? Right? Okay. Have you seen? Okay, I'm just gonna. Hey, have you seen some people like try to record some of the screens either in the car or something? And you would see those kind of like lines. Have you seen those kind of stuff? Sometimes the screen of the monitor as well, you will see lines. Like the screen will become dark and bright, looks super crappy. Nobody seen that?
I know you're talking about.
You're talking about, right? Why? Why our human eyes cannot do that? Yes, because of the firmware of the camera coincides with the frequency of the monitor.
Have you seen the helicopters where if the shutter speed of the camera matches the rotational speed, it looks like it's not moving?
Yes, that's the point. Because our man's eye cannot capture, is not like accurate enough, or like we're not flashy enough to detect anything in the range of 55 to 60 hertz. But in reality, if you have a camera shooting this at similar frequency, you will actually see slight bright dot. So, okay, that's the natural frequency. Nice. We're going like we're making really great progress. I mean slow. So it's fast. Okay, so now we have the displacement. I thought I did not have to. I thought you guys would be like, oh, Dr. Wang, I know how to solve that differential equation. I'm gonna write it for you on the blackboard so that I can save a little space for that. You know what I'm saying? So. But hey, you don't think this is like elegant and beautiful? Like we solved this. We solved this. We did.
You did.
We did. Okay, so now we have the displacement. Now we move on to the velocity. That based on this equation over here, we can just do one derivative of the z over time. Then we're talking about z, capital Z, time omega, time cosine omega nt minus alpha plus a half a pi, and then acceleration z dot dot is omega n squared cosine omega nt minus alpha plus a pi. So basically the amplitude of the velocity changed, right? And also the amplitude of the acceleration also changed. But their circular frequency is still the same, but their phase angle is changed as well. So basically everything is velocity lags behind the displacement by half a pi, and acceleration lags behind the velocity by another half a pi.
So when we're taking these derivatives, why are we being cosine the same?
Because we want to compare them. So that we can compare them, we can look at them. Yes, it does matter. Okay. Oh, no, there's no trick, Connor. You see that half a pi?
Yeah.
The half a pi is basically have that thing is negative sign.
That half pi is negative sign?
Yeah.
You just throw that in there?
With the
I'm confused right now.
I think we can make this lecture the whole course. So let's dive into the trig a little bit. Connor, I promise you.
I trust you. I'm just gonna trust.
Do you want to go to my office hour sometime? Let's sit down. It's gonna help. But anyway, so you go back to the slide and you can see basically if we plot everything out, you can see what it looks like. That's the displacement, and this is the displacement in the solid line, and then the velocity is this line, and you can see like they are lagging behind by however much, and then you have the velocity as well. So this is kind of how it looks like. Mathematically, they will definitely make sense. So okay, that's it for the undamped case. Sure. Right. I think next time I'm gonna invite all your math professors sitting here and then try to yell at you. So do you still have a little bit of energy to continue, or do you want to take a break? Good. That's the spirit. Okay, so next the case is forced vibration of spring system. Similar case over here. I promise I'm not gonna solve this one, right? I'm just gonna give you the solution. So I thought you would be very appreciative, like, oh my god, so beautiful.
What was your favorite course you took in college?
Soil mechanics. Basically the introduction to introduction to my life. That's harsh, man. Not concrete, not steel. I'm not a water guy, so I don't remember. That was too long back ago. Hey, I was not a good math student, I have to say. So I was definitely not as good as you, so that's for sure. Okay. For this case over here, steel spring, no dash pot, and then we are gonna throw a force that, from a simplification standpoint, we want to make the force a sinusoidal force. So that the sinusoidal force have a amplitude of Q naught, and then have a circular frequency of omega. That's the external loading, right? And also have a beta as a phase angle. So we want to be as general as possible to describe this external force, but this external force is also a sinusoidal loading. You might want to say, hey, Dr. Wang, I mean, a lot of earthquakes is not sinusoidal. Yeah, you are absolutely right. But Connor, do you remember the Fourier transfer? Have you heard about anything about the Fourier transfer? Fourier. Okay, whatever. I just call it. In Chinese, it's a Fourier, so you know. Well, anyway, any random. Yeah. Yeah. You guys know what Peter's talking about?
I'm going to lecture in partial differential equations.
So, okay. Either way, the basic idea of that spur is, if I give you any random earthquake type of loading, as long as it's going up and down, have some sort of like frequency going up and down, and you can actually kind of dissect that into a combo of sinusoidal waves.
Function into a form of cosine and sine.
Yes. Convert them to a series of sine and cosine, probably with different amplitude and with different natural frequency. Yeah. Right? So that's the reason why anything in the world you can convert that. So that's the reason why, like, we're just took a simple one, solve that first. So technically, from a mathematical standpoint, you can solve everything because you can break that thing down to sine and cosines. Does that make sense? Okay, good. That's the reason why we're doing this. Gage? Just you're allowed to say anything in this class for this lecture only, okay? Probably for next lecture. Like, if you're frustrated, if you want to swear, that's totally fine, okay? So, because I understand, okay? Like, you just, oh, Dr. Wang, this is bullshit. I don't want to learn anything with this. So that's fine. But anyway, again, that's the reason why we're gonna have that. So I'm gonna get the governing equations for this. Very similar. We don't have that annoying dash pot. So we will still have only have the spring, acceleration, and we will have that as the external force sine omega t plus beta. Okay. If you have the dash dot, you will have another force because the dash dot will have that c value. That c value times the velocity is the force. Yep. Okay. Great. Again, I'm only gonna give you the steady state solution. We're not gonna solve this in the class. So that would be your z is, this equation is actually very, very short. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Duh. The reason why I'm breaking this down looking like this has a couple reasons. The first one is we call this, remember the Q naught is the amplitude of the external force. And the Q naught over K, and we call this is the static deflection. Okay, that's the static deflection. And we call this in the middle the magnification factor. So some textbook call this MF. And also sometimes you would say people call this dynamic amplification factor, or they call them AF. So just depends on what textbook you use. So that's that. And this one over here, you can't combine those things into one because they have different circular frequency, right? So they have different circular frequency. So, but generally, this factor, this part is describing the system response to applied load at the loading frequency. Because you're applying loading, so that would definitely impact the loading the system response. And this part over here basically describes the free vibration effect. At natural frequency. Kind of wild because the spring has to think about, oh, what is my own natural frequency? I would have part of the movement corresponding to that, and then someone is pushing me using a certain frequency. I gotta respond to that as well. So we're not gonna really take a look at that sine part, but we're mainly looking at the amplitude of the whole thing, right? And if you look at this amplitude, the Q naught over K, that is a constant value, because if the Q naught is fixed, your K is fixed, that is always a fixed value. But what about the second? What about that MF or AF? So if you look at this MF or AF, tell me when the external circular frequency is approaching the natural frequency of the system, what's going to happen? This MF or this AF number is going to approaching what? Yeah, 1/0 is illegal. That's for, you know, young children, but we are engineers. If omega is approaching omega n, that means your omega over omega n squared is approaching 1, right? And then that means our factor 1/0. What is that number? What is 1/0? It's not illegal. Approaching infinity, right? Yeah. We're not saying that it's actually 0. It's like probably 1/0. Ooh, what? So we're talking about a infinite number, right? So what does that mean in reality? That means if your loading frequency is very, very close to the natural frequency of the system, that means this number is going crazy large. That means this amplitude of the system is becomes super, super crazy. Does that make sense? Yes. That means we're talking about something called like a resonance. Right? The amplitude is going to be so much more than, or so many times, that this little small number. So if we're going to look at this thing over here, so basically this is the y-axis is the MF or the AF, and then the x-axis is the ratio of that omega over omega n. And look at this, if it's kind of the middle, the number is going to be infinite. That curve is going to go up all the way. And let's say if it's 2, then your amplification is actually somewhere over there, probably around 0.5. But in reality, it's not going to be the case. I know, let's say if a wind has a frequency applying on that bridge, if that frequency is very close to the natural frequency of the bridge, we know the bridge is going to go wild. But not necessarily the bridge is going to be blown up to the moon, which this is indicating that, right? But why? Because what? This case does not consider that. Yeah, does not consider friction. That means does not consider the damping. Right? Does not consider damping, so there's no cap for how much energy this could respond to. But if you have a little bit of damping, you're gonna get some amperes on the floor, which will solve in the second half of the class. What if we fill the damping side? Let's see what's gonna happen. Okay? Great. Let's take a break. Yep. Okay. One more slight correction I need to make on the notes is that go back to that solution for the forced vibration of the undamped system. Remember, I put a steady solution over here. please get rid of that steady, because this is not going to achieve a steady state. This thing is just keep going and going forever. So apologize for that. Okay. And we talked about, when this omega is approaching omega n, we're gonna have a infinite magnification factor with time, and this is the case that we're gonna call a resonance condition. A resonance condition. And we look at this together because we know that this is how it looks like for this factor. And for this system, that infinite movement is not achieved just by a few cycles. So it essentially follows this equation that your Z max, or your amplitude of your displacement, is 2/half of the n pi and the zs. And the only parameter that you don't know within this equation is this n. This n is the number of cycles. Number of cycles. Zs. Oh, okay. I did not. So my bad. This is Zs. My bad, dog. So Zs is a static deflection. So basically, you see, this is kind of a linear function, right? A linear function of the Zs, a linear function between the max, the amplitude of the Z and the number of cycles. So basically, if the number of cycles are going on and on and on, your Z max is gonna be a huge number, right? So, but within the first few cycles, it's not gonna be that bad. So, okay, and then we're gonna move on to the free vibration with damping. Well, for the free vibration with damping, sure. Yep. Okay, I'm gonna put out that's the static deformation. Did I call it static deformation? Oh, that's the same thing. Deflection. Deflection, deformation. We're also always talking about the spring, right? So, okay. Free vibration with damping. Let's do our favorite thing. Draw a picture first. And put a smiley face.
Also, why is the box of the spring, why is it getting put in the hole?
It's foundation. And our soil is the spring and the dash pot. Yeah. So, yeah. But Gage, this is essentially, you see, it's the same as something like that, right? Yeah. Sure. It's the same thing as a structure. Like if you're gonna move left and right, then you have the chord, and then this is the same as this. So it's essentially the same. Okay, for this one, you have the spring K, and you're gonna have a beautiful dash pot. Because now we're talking about the damping, this is closer to reality that any material in the world deform or absorb energy, have internal frictions, could have internal frictions, basically. So you gotta have some sort of mechanism to absorb that energy. And then we all know K, and this C, we call this viscous coefficient. C. And we talked a little bit about the force. And I think I demoed this yesterday as well, right? And the force or the resistance this thing is going to give you is linear to the velocity. Okay. And yesterday I tried to shut down the door real quick, and then I feel more resistance, right? So the force is basically your C times the velocity, one dot of the displacement. Can someone try to write me the governing equation for this case? Free vibration with dashpot.
So what I said earlier, then you have to increase
Can you say it again?
D double prime plus CZ prime plus rho squared to the basically that's the one. And then now you have to increase so
I'm only asking for the governing equation, not the solution. So yeah, I appreciate that though. Okay. Of that, right? So how do we solve this thing? Right. Turn them to R's. MR squared plus CR plus K is 0. Okay. And we solve for R. R1 and R2 is minus C plus square root 4 km over 2m. Okay, of that. Well, we did a refresh our memory onto how to solve a differential equation like this. I'm writing this way, but we could have different cases depending on how many roots and what kind of roots you have, right? So the first case, case 1, based on that, the case 1 would be if this is larger than 0. If that's the case, that basically means your C, the viscous coefficient, is more than 2 square root mk. So if this is the case, what are the roots like? Real roots or complex or identical? Right? 2 real roots. And are those identical or not? No. Okay, great. So we have 2 distinct real roots. And please tell me, are those 2 roots positive or negative? Huh? Why?
well, it's greater than 0.
Uh,
But if those
Guys, you're here to actually use your brain during the class. You can't be like, oh, I'm a little duck, just stuff foot in my mouth, and then I'm gonna be gone by the 20 minutes. So, have you heard of a stuffing duck type of thing? Yeah. No, a real duck. Like sometimes because people enjoy the fat of the on the skin of the duck, and if you want to make them grow as fast as possible, you just stuff food in their mouths.
That's what was. It's goose liver that they force you.
And yeah, geese as well, so that you can have their liver. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so hey, let's look at that. I'm gonna okay. Hey, positive or negative? Let's look at this. Hey, if minus negative c minus a bunch of thing, that's gonna be negative, right? And the minus c plus a bunch of stuff that could be positive, could be negative, but see, the stuff under the square root is smaller than c squared. So the number back here is gonna be small. So we're talking about both negative. Roots. Okay, both negative roots. And we're and we call this case overdamped. I'm gonna explain what is overdamped a little bit later. For now, just remember we call this case overdamped case. Okay, overdamped. Because we're gonna take a look at the solution a little later to find out. So case 2, based on the roots, you would have different solutions. So case 2 is, what if your c squared minus 4km is 0? That means your c, the damping coefficient, not damping, sorry, the viscous coefficient is exactly 2 over m type k time k. You have 2 repeated real roots, right? Any questions of why c is 2 square root mk or km? No question about this thing over here? Yeah, but why not negative number? Where's the negative number go? Because this is a real coefficient. You can't have a negative number as a coefficient, right? You can't say, oh, that coefficient is negative 5. What does that mean in the physical world, right? It has to be a positive number. So you have 2 repeated real roots, and tell me that roots is positive or negative. They are negative, right? Right? Because that square root is 0, so you have a negative c over 2m. That's a negative. Okay, and we call this case no, we call this critically damped. Call this critically damped. And when it's critically damped, that coefficient we want to use as c sub c, and we will use that as a benchmark a little bit later, okay? That critical damped c sub c is what? Would you agree that this is 2 square root mk, right? Because in this case, c squared is 4 mk or km. So that c sub c is 2 square root mk. Okay, okay. So case 3 is what? what if this thing is smaller or less than 0? Yes, very similar to what we had before, that basically our C is less than 2 square mk, that we would have 2 non-real or complex roots. Kind of similar, yes, similar to what we had before for that. Yeah, they will. Yep. And we call this case what? Yay. Underdamped. So we have the 3 case out there, and the next thing is going to be very easy, just to find solutions for every single case, right?
15 minutes. So we can't
Oh.
all the other-
That's all right. Okay, so let's look at the overdamped case. First one, case 1. Let's look at the overdamped case. Solutions. Overdamped case. So overdamped, we have 2 distinct real roots. Still remember the general solution of the 2 real roots scenario for that differential equation? Our 2 roots are, I have already had this somewhere, but I'm just gonna put it over here so that you can get everything together. C squared minus 4mk over 2m. And the general solution for this would be A1 times e to the power of R1t plus A2 e power R2t. Okay, so, I'm using A1 and A2. I think we were using C1 and C2. It doesn't matter. Those are just constants. Okay. We're not gonna solve this, but again, if you want, it can be easily solved by throwing in 2 boundary conditions. Okay, it can be easily solved. So, but my question is, you look at this number, and remember, R1, R2, both are negative numbers, right? Both are negative numbers, and the function of z is a power function. Do you think there's any oscillation under this scenario? Look at this equation. Is there any oscillation?
Thinks it's like hold off for a little bit and then just dies really quickly. So based on that, I would think a little bit of oscillation.
Right? So, well, it depends on after we solve. Well, also depends on the value of the A1 and A2. But if R1, R2 are a negative number, so basically, if the time increase, you're gonna have a e to the power of a negative number. That negative number is increasing. That means the e value is gonna drop very quickly, right? So this is basically a power function. That means the z will decrease with the time because of the R1, R2 are negative, and there's no oscillation. They're gonna drop, and that's it. This z number is gonna approaching zero from a positive number, like a power function, and that's it. So no oscillation. Well, if you have the second scenario, case 2, critically damped, we have two same identical solutions and the real solutions, and then the general solution is e to the power of c2m t plus a1 plus a2 times t. Okay.
That exponent is C on the top.
Yeah. Yep. Basically, the c over 2m, that's the roots. So.
I have a question about C. If it's give A1 plus A2T.
Yeah.
The T doesn't almost like times A1, but just times A2.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I understand. Yeah. You guys just want to make sure. But look at your old notes for that math class, and you will find the exact same thing for that. So, well, in this case, your z is still gonna decrease with the time. No oscillation. And faster decay compared with the overdamped case. So it's actually more powerful that your z is come back to that neutral position quickly.
It's faster to get it.
Yep. Yep. That's just based on the math. It's faster decay than the overdamped. Okay, so now I'm gonna have another definition that we're just gonna define something called a damping ratio. Damping ratio is a very important factor, and this is something that you absolutely have to know, the damping ratio. So damping ratio, in this class, I'm gonna use D, capital D. And in a lot of other textbooks, you would see a Greek letter word. I just don't know, like zeta. Yeah, how do you write zeta? Sometimes I do this. Yeah, right. But yeah, this. So some of the textbook would use zeta, and I'm pretty sure the ASCE standard they're using zeta as well. But I just hate the zeta. How to write that? It's just I'm gonna use a D. They're the same thing. Okay, damping ratio, usually in percentage. So we define damping ratio as in the coefficient, viscous coefficient over the coefficient, the critical coefficient. And do you still remember C sub C? We talked about C sub C a little bit, right? And C sub C, yes, square 2 square root mk. So so that your damping ratio is essentially your C value over 2 times mk. 2 times mk. So that's the damping ratio, usually in percentage. And then is more than 1, is over damped. If it is 1, critically damped. If it's less than 1, it's under damped.